From taking a shot at the most powerful people in golf to wanting to change up just about everything, here's why Ian Poulter is demanding changes to golf. The merger of the century came as a shock to everyone, but this golfer thinks there's still some damage control that golf's leading executives can do. Now that a truce has been called, the world champion believes golf needs fundamental changes. Ian thinks that golf's leading executives can't continue to be front and center if LIV players have a shot at going back into the traditional format after the merger. When asked if there needs to be a change in the sport's corridors of power, Poulter agreed, saying that people need to be held accountable for their actions, and by that, he means the dudes who banish players like him from every other circuit after joining LIV. Even his Ryder Cup teammate Lee Westwood has called out the hypocrisy of the guys pulling the strings, and he's clearly not happy with how the tours surrendered after months of rivalry. When LIV first broke out into the golf scene, folks over at the PGA were super against it. Despite that, plenty of people went over to the other side and accepted the PIF's million-dollar offers. Ian himself said yes to the Saudi-backed tour during its inaugural event in June 2022. But agreeing to play for LIV meant crucifying yourself and being labeled as a defector, which was career suicide for a guy like Ian. Now that everyone's sitting at the same table again, the situation's not as simple. Ian admitted that having players like him return to their former playing domains would help add value. But the thing is, no one saw the merger coming. When LIV Golf started making waves, it was a direct threat to the PGA's business. To keep things under their control, they gave their players the cold shoulder. This shocked a lot of folks, and is exactly why many golfers are having a hard time wrapping their heads around the fact that the PGA agreed to something like this. The tour's Commissioner, Jay Monahan, also admitted that he was going to look hypocritical because of the merger. But is that enough to undo the damage the PGA's done since June 2022? I mean, there was a time when Monahan was so against the Saudi-backed tour that he used the 9/11 tragedy as an example of why golf shouldn't be getting all buddy-buddy with the Saudis. So his backtracking now seems like he's got other motives. While Ian took a more subtle dig at golf's executives, Lee Westwood took a direct hit at them. The Majestic's GC player claimed that when the sponsorship for the Canadian Open was required, RBC signed a deal with Aramco, which is a Saudi government-owned oil company, and back then they had no problem going public and making all that money from Saudi Arabia. But the fact that LIV was giving them a tough time struck a chord, and for some reason, all of the pressure fell on the players. Those who rebelled were told that the tour will only give them their card back after they pay their fines to Wentworth, which sounds really whack if you ask me, even though there's plenty of PGA executives who've claimed that Jay Monahan's gonna roll the dice now to decide the breakaway series future. A lot of LIV golfers are confident that the league will stick around for long. Even Cameron Smith's pretty confident about this. Aside from the money, LIV's format was one of the main attractions to the players. Cam says that he can't really see LIV going away, and if you ask all the 48 guys out there with him, everyone's had a good time, and they're all enjoying what they're doing. The team element brings 3 or 4 guys really close, which wasn't the case before, so the fact that LIV introduced that was really unique. Smith doesn't see that going anywhere, and maybe this is exactly the change Ian's talking about too. Because when you think about this, these guys have been in the game for a long time now, so they'd know what works best for golf. The merger might have strapped a band-aid on things for now, but there's still a long road ahead. When Saudi Arabia took control of top-level golf, after a multi-billion-dollar investment, uniting LIV Golf Series with the PGA and DP World Tours, it was nothing less than a cultural reset. Not only was this a solution for LIV golfers to return to their former tours, but all types of antitrust lawsuits between LIV and the PGA Tour were dropped and long forgotten. While the Saudi Public Investment Fund will put up the money, pouring billions into this new era of golf, all 3 tours will now exist under it, becoming one entity. The merger also opens the door for those who left the Ryder Cup. But considering players like Sergio Garcia, Henrik Stenson, Lee Westwood, and Ian Poulter resigned from the DP World Tour, there's a big question mark on whether they can rejoin as soon as possible. As I mentioned earlier, Jay Monahan resisted LIV since its inception. He might be open to criticism now, accepting all his hypocrisy, but that's not going to fix anything in golf's history. It's no wonder Rory McIlroy felt like a sacrificial lamb. He defended the PGA Tour with all his might, becoming the de facto spokesperson for it, only to have his top guy shake hands with the enemy. Despite the tours coming together under one roof now, there needs to be a lot of structural changes going forward. LIV certainly shook things up in the game and lived up to its slogan, golf but louder. But now that it's joined forces with its competitor, the PGA could use a couple tricks from LIV's own playbook and use them to unify golf in a way that we've never seen before. One of the most talked about aspects of the Saudi-backed tour was the team format, which elevated the overall competition in the sport. All 48 players were split into 12 teams, and aside from their individual gig, there was a bigger team competition at play with a sweet $4 million bonus pot at the end. LIV players were clearly a fan of the concept, so hopefully the new breakaway series also adds it to their schedule. The 3-round tournaments were also super popular among players, and LIV's always been proud of hosting them. The circuit's own name refers to the number 54 in Roman numerals, which is the number of holes played across each tournament. This was definitely the star of their setup, but also super controversial too. Many LIV critics were quick to bash the 54-hole concept, but if Jay Monahan and Yasser Al-Rumayyan can set their differences aside, then I'm pretty sure the players can make do with a 54-hole format too. If not, then maybe they can even look into shotgun start. The Saudi-backed tours definitely turned their back on the sport's tradition more than once. The PGA Tours opted for the use of specific tee times for its players since its inception, but Greg Norman wasn't having it. He wanted LIV events to start with every player starting at the same time, with each group taking a spot on each of the 18 holes to kick off their tournament. While the PGA Tour has used 2 tee starts for a while, between the 1st and 10th, if things go well, they might be able to let LIV influence them some more in the future. Match play knockouts are also a fun way to switch things up. In its maiden season, before switching its season finale to the match play format, the series hosted 7-stroke play tournaments, but the match play knockouts turned out to be crazy popular with both fans and players. After arranging themselves according to their rankings, each LIV team then battles it out against their rivals, which certainly cranks up the competition. The changes in format might be fun ways to tweak the new series, but despite wanting to adopt much of LIV's one-of-a-kind layout, Ian Poulter's more concerned about wanting some change in authority. He was not happy with the way the upper management dealt with LIV's debut, and now that he's resigned from the DP Tour, he's got no idea what the future holds. As far as the Ryder Cup's concerned, he's hopeful since it's been a huge part of his life. He also thinks that he can captain Europe in the Cup again. But the problem with golf's current hierarchy is the lack of transparency with the merger. Almost no one knew about the deal until it was made public. And what can I say? That left a bad impression on the guys that stood through hell and high water with Monahan. For players like Poulter and Westwood, it was even more uncomfortable, because these guys were isolated after joining LIV and were called greedy for agreeing to make million-dollar paydays. There you have it. From just straight up wanting to make everything different to taking a shot at the most powerful people in the sport, this was why Ian Poulter is demanding changes to golf.
It certainly is, and here at the 4th for a birdie. Putted beautifully yesterday in Poulter.